You know that moment when you're scrolling through social media and you see someone your age posting about their third vacation this year, their new Tesla, or their latest real estate investment, and you can't help but wonder how they're pulling it off. Maybe you're making decent money, maybe you're even doing well by most standards, but somehow you feel like you're missing something fundamental about how money actually works. Well, here's the thing that might surprise you. The difference between people who build serious wealth and those who stay stuck in the middle class isn't usually about how much they earn. It's about following a completely different set of rules that most people never learn. And I'm not talking about some get-rich-quick scheme or secret investment strategy that only billionaires know about. I'm talking about basic principles that anyone can implement, but that 95% of people completely ignore. My name is Alex, and I spent over a decade in investment banking watching wealthy clients make decisions that seemed almost counterintuitive at first. After retiring in my mid-30s, I've dedicated my time to studying exactly what separates people who build generational wealth from those who work hard their entire lives but never seem to get ahead. What I discovered is that wealthy people operate by a completely different playbook, and today I'm going to share the 5 most important rules from that playbook. But before we dive in, let me tell you something that's going to challenge everything you think you know about money. Most people believe that building wealth is about earning more, spending less, and investing the difference. And while that's not wrong, it's incomplete. The wealthy understand that money is just a tool, and like any tool, there are techniques for using it effectively that most people never learn. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right financially but still not seeing the results you want, or if you're curious about what really separates the wealthy from everyone else, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This video is going to reveal some uncomfortable truths about money that might completely change how you approach your finances. Now, here's what makes this topic so fascinating. When I was working with high net worth clients, I noticed patterns in their behavior that were completely different from what I'd been taught about personal finance. These weren't people who inherited their money or got lucky with some startup. These were individuals who systematically built wealth by following principles that seemed almost backwards compared to conventional wisdom. The first rule that wealthy people follow religiously is something I call the velocity principle, and it's probably the opposite of what you've been told about money management. Most people think the goal is to accumulate as much cash as possible and keep it safe in savings accounts or conservative investments. But wealthy people understand that money sitting still is actually losing value, not just because of inflation, but because of opportunity cost. Here's how this plays out in real life. The average person gets a bonus or tax refund and immediately thinks about putting it in a high-yield savings account or paying down debt. The wealthy person asks a completely different question. They ask, how can I put this money to work so that it generates more money? This doesn't mean they're reckless with their finances. It means they understand that money is meant to move and multiply, not sit in accounts earning 2 or 3% while real opportunities pass them by. Let me give you a concrete example. I once worked with a client who owned several small businesses. Every time one of his companies had a good quarter, instead of keeping the extra cash in business accounts, he would immediately look for ways to deploy that capital. Sometimes it was expanding existing operations, sometimes it was acquiring competitors, and sometimes it was investing in completely different asset classes. The key was that he never let money sit idle for more than a few weeks. Compare that to most people who might get a $5,000 bonus and celebrate by putting it in a savings account where it earns maybe $150 a year. The wealthy person is asking how they can turn that $5,000 into $7,000 within the next 12 months through strategic deployment. This brings us to the second rule, which is what I call strategic debt utilization. Now, before you start thinking I'm encouraging people to go into debt, hear me out. Most people have been conditioned to believe that all debt is bad and should be eliminated as quickly as possible. Wealthy people understand that there's good debt and bad debt, and they use good debt as a tool to accelerate wealth building. Bad debt is debt used to purchase depreciating assets or consumption items. Your credit card debt from dinners out, Your car loan for a vehicle that loses value every year, your personal loan for a vacation. These are wealth destroyers, and wealthy people avoid them like the plague. But good debt is debt used to purchase appreciating assets or income-producing investments, and wealthy people use this strategically. Here's where it gets interesting. While most people are focused on paying off their mortgage as quickly as possible, wealthy people often do the exact opposite. If they can borrow money at 4% and invest it at 8%, they're making money on borrowed capital. This is called leverage, and it's one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available. I remember explaining this concept to someone who was obsessed with paying off his house early. He was throwing every extra dollar at his mortgage, proud that he'd be debt-free in 15 years instead of 30. But when we ran the numbers, we discovered that by investing those extra mortgage payments in a diversified portfolio instead, he would end up with over $200,000 more in net worth by retirement, even after accounting for the mortgage interest he'd pay. The third rule wealthy people follow is something that completely revolutionizes how they think about income. And it's probably the most counterintuitive principle on this list. Most people focus on increasing their active income, which means trading more time for more money. They work overtime, take on side hustles, or pursue promotions that require longer hours. Wealthy people focus on building passive income streams that generate money without requiring their direct time and attention. This isn't just about investing in stocks or real estate, although those can be components of passive income. It's about systematically building assets that produce cash flow independent of their personal labor. This might mean creating intellectual property that generates royalties, building businesses that can operate without their day-to-day involvement, or investing in income-producing assets that appreciate over time. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When your lifestyle depends entirely on your ability to work, you're essentially trapped in a system where stopping work means stopping income. But when you've built multiple streams of passive income, work becomes optional rather than necessary. This gives you incredible leverage in every aspect of your life, from career decisions to investment choices to personal relationships. What makes this principle so powerful is the compounding effect over time. Every dollar you invest in building passive income today potentially eliminates the need to earn multiple dollars through active work in the future. It's like building a money-generating machine that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you're sleeping, vacationing, or pursuing other interests. The fourth rule is where things get really interesting, and it's something that most people never even consider when thinking about wealth building. Wealthy people understand that their network isn't just about who they know. It's about who knows them and what value they can provide to others. This is the fourth rule that completely separates the wealthy from everyone else, and it's something I call strategic relationship building. Most people think networking is about collecting business cards at conferences or connecting with people on LinkedIn when they need something. But wealthy individuals approach relationships as long-term investments, where they're constantly looking for ways to add value to others before ever asking for anything in return. They understand that every meaningful relationship has the potential to create opportunities that can't be manufactured through traditional channels. Here's what this looks like in practice. When I was still working in investment banking, I watched wealthy clients spend enormous amounts of time and energy helping others solve problems, make connections, or find opportunities, often with no immediate benefit to themselves. They'd introduce competitors to each other, recommend service providers to people who couldn't afford their own rates, or share investment insights with individuals who had much smaller portfolios. At first, this seemed counterproductive. Why would successful people give away their time and knowledge for free? But over the years, I realized this was one of their most sophisticated wealth-building strategies. These relationships would pay dividends in ways that were impossible to predict. The competitor they helped might later refer a massive deal. The small investor they advised might become a key employee in their next venture. The service provider they recommended might offer exclusive access to opportunities down the road. The mathematics of relationship building are actually quite predictable, even though the individual outcomes aren't. If you consistently add value to 100 people over several years, a certain percentage of those relationships will generate opportunities that far exceed the time and energy you invested. But most people never reach this critical mass because they approach networking backwards, always asking what others can do for them instead of what they can do for others. This connects directly to the fifth and most important rule that wealthy people follow, which is what I call the abundance mindset shift. This isn't some feel-good philosophy about positive thinking. It's a fundamental change in how they perceive opportunities, risks, and resources that allows them to see possibilities that others miss entirely. Most people operate from a scarcity mindset without even realizing it. They believe that resources are limited, that success is a zero-sum game, and that taking risks means potentially losing what they already have. This creates a mental framework where they're constantly protecting and preserving rather than growing and expanding. They save money in low-yield accounts because they're afraid of losing it. They stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid they won't find anything better. They avoid investments because they focus on what could go wrong rather than what could go right. Wealthy people have trained themselves to think differently. When they see an investment opportunity, their first instinct isn't to focus on what they could lose, but rather on what they could gain and how they can structure the deal to minimize downside while maximizing upside potential. When they encounter a business challenge, they don't see it as a problem to be avoided, but as an opportunity to create value that others are missing. This mindset shift affects every financial decision they make. Where most people see market volatility and get scared, wealthy people see buying opportunities. Where most people see economic uncertainty and pull back, wealthy people see less competition and more favorable deal terms. Where most people see a saturated market and walk away, wealthy people see inefficiencies they can exploit. But here's what makes this principle so powerful and so misunderstood. The abundance mindset isn't about being unrealistically optimistic or ignoring risks. It's about developing the ability to accurately assess risk-reward ratios and having the confidence to act when the odds are in your favor. Wealthy people aren't risk seekers, they're calculated risk takers who understand that avoiding all risk is actually the riskiest strategy of all. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this difference. During the 2008 financial crisis, while most people were panicking and moving their money into cash and bonds, one of my former clients was systematically buying real estate, stocks, and even small businesses at deeply discounted prices. He wasn't being reckless or ignoring the economic reality. He was looking at historical data that showed every major economic downturn had been followed by significant recovery, and he positioned himself to benefit from that inevitable rebound. By 2012, his net worth had tripled while most people were still recovering from losses they'd suffered by panic selling at the bottom of the market. The difference wasn't that he had better information or more money to start with. The difference was that he had trained himself to see opportunity where others saw only danger. This abundance mindset also extends to how wealthy people think about their own capabilities and limitations. Instead of saying, "I don't know how to do that," and walking away from opportunities, they ask, "Who can I learn from or partner with to make this happen?" They understand that their personal knowledge and skills are just starting points, not limitations on what they can accomplish. Most people underestimate their ability to learn new skills, adapt to changing circumstances, and solve complex problems. They stay within their comfort zones and miss opportunities that require them to stretch beyond their current capabilities. Wealthy people have learned that discomfort is temporary, but the growth that comes from pushing through challenges creates permanent increases in their ability to generate wealth. This is why you'll often see wealthy individuals involved in industries or investment strategies they knew nothing about just a few years earlier. They're not naturally smarter or more talented than everyone else. They've simply developed the confidence to enter unfamiliar territory and the systems to minimize their learning curve through mentors, advisors, and strategic partnerships. The compound effect of following these 5 rules consistently over time is what creates the seemingly magical results that make wealthy people appear to have some secret knowledge. But there's no magic involved, just the disciplined application of principles that most people either don't know or don't have the patience to implement. What's fascinating is how these rules build on each other and create momentum that accelerates over time. The velocity principle generates more capital to deploy. Strategic debt utilization amplifies returns on that capital. Building passive income streams creates financial freedom that enables bigger risks and longer-term thinking. Strategic relationship building opens doors to opportunities that aren't available to the general public. And the abundance mindset provides the mental framework to recognize and act on all of these advantages. But here's where most people get stuck, and it's something I see constantly when mentoring individuals who want to build wealth but struggle to break through to the next level. They know these rules work, they understand the logic behind each principle, but they can't seem to execute consistently enough to see meaningful results. And this brings us to what I consider the hidden sixth rule that makes all the other rules actually work in practice. The problem isn't knowledge, it's implementation. Most people treat wealth building like a hobby rather than a systematic process. They'll apply the velocity principle for a few months, then get distracted and let money sit idle again. They'll start building passive income streams, then abandon the project when they don't see immediate results. They'll network strategically for a while, then fall back into transactional relationships when they get busy with work. Wealthy people understand that consistency beats intensity every single time. They don't make dramatic financial moves that require heroic effort to maintain. Instead, they build systems and habits that make wealth building automatic rather than dependent on motivation or willpower. Here's what this looks like in real life. Instead of trying to find the perfect investment opportunity and putting all their capital into it, they systematically deploy money into multiple asset classes every month, regardless of market conditions. Instead of waiting for the perfect time to start a business or buy real estate, they take consistent small actions that move them closer to their goals, even when progress feels slow. This systematic approach extends to how they educate themselves about money and investing. Most people consume financial information randomly, reading whatever article catches their attention or following whatever investment guru is trending on social media. Wealthy people treat financial education like a curriculum, systematically building their knowledge in specific areas that align with their wealth-building strategy. I remember working with a client who wanted to get into real estate investing but had zero experience in the field. Instead of jumping into the first deal he found or spending months paralyzed by analysis, he created a learning plan. He committed to reading one real estate book per month, attending one local real estate meetup monthly, and analyzing 10 potential deals every week even though he wasn't ready to buy anything yet. After 6 months of this systematic approach, he had built enough knowledge and connections to recognize a genuinely good opportunity when it appeared. More importantly, he had developed the confidence and competence to act quickly when that opportunity arose. The deal he ultimately purchased generated enough cash flow to quit his day job within 2 years. The difference between this approach and how most people handle wealth building is night and day. Most people wait until they feel completely ready, which means they never start, or they start impulsively without proper preparation, which often leads to expensive mistakes that discourage them from trying again. Wealthy people have learned to balance preparation with action in a way that creates momentum rather than paralysis. They understand that you don't need to know everything before you start, but you do need to know enough to make intelligent decisions and avoid catastrophic errors. This brings us to another critical difference in how wealthy people approach financial decisions compared to everyone else. They think in terms of decades, not months or even years. This long-term perspective allows them to make choices that might seem counterintuitive in the short term, but create massive advantages over time. Most people optimize for immediate comfort or gratification. They choose the job with the higher starting salary over the one with better long-term growth potential. They buy the house they can afford today rather than the one that positions them for future wealth building. They invest in what's popular now rather than what will likely perform well over the next 10 to 20 years. Wealthy people regularly make decisions that are uncomfortable or inconvenient in the short term because they can see how those choices compound over time. They might live in a smaller house than they can afford so they can invest the difference. They might work in a lower-paying job that gives them equity upside or valuable experience. They might invest in boring, unsexy assets that generate consistent returns rather than chasing whatever investment is getting the most media attention. This long-term thinking also affects how they handle setbacks and failures. Most people view financial mistakes as evidence that they're not cut out for wealth building. They lose money on an investment and conclude that investing isn't for them. They fail at starting a business and decide entrepreneurship is too risky. Wealthy people view these same setbacks as expensive but valuable education. They analyze what went wrong, extract the lessons, and apply that knowledge to future decisions. They understand that building wealth is a skill that requires practice. And like any skill, you're going to make mistakes while you're learning. I've seen this play out countless times in my mentoring work. The people who eventually break through to significant wealth are rarely the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who make mistakes early, learn from them quickly, and develop better judgment as a result. The people who stay stuck are often the ones who are so afraid of making mistakes that they never take enough risks to learn anything meaningful. This connects to something else that wealthy people understand about money that most people miss entirely. They recognize that their relationship with money is largely psychological, not logical. Most financial decisions are driven by emotions like fear, greed, envy, or pride, even when people think they're being rational. Wealthy people have learned to recognize these emotional patterns in themselves and develop systems to make better decisions despite their natural psychological biases. They might use automatic investing to remove the temptation to time the market. They might work with advisors who can provide objective perspectives when they're too emotionally involved in a decision. They might create rules for themselves about when to sell investments or when to walk away from deals. Most importantly, they've learned to separate their self-worth from their net worth. This might sound like therapy speak, but it has enormous practical implications for wealth building. When your identity isn't tied to your financial performance, you can take calculated risks without being paralyzed by the fear of what others will think if you fail. You can also avoid the trap of lifestyle inflation that destroys wealth as quickly as it's created. When you don't need expensive possessions to feel successful, you can redirect that money toward assets that actually build wealth over time. This psychological mastery also helps them navigate the social dynamics of wealth building. Most people are surrounded by others who have middle-class mindsets about money, and breaking away from that groupthink requires enormous mental strength. Family members might question why you're not buying a bigger house. Friends might not understand why you're working on weekends to build a side business. Colleagues might think you're crazy for turning down a promotion that would require longer hours but wouldn't significantly advance your wealth-building goals. Wealthy people have learned to filter advice and opinions through the lens of who's giving them and what results that person has achieved. They listen respectfully to well-meaning friends and family, but they make decisions based on guidance from people who have actually built the kind of wealth they want to create. This isn't about being arrogant or dismissive of others. It's about recognizing that most people, even those who care about you, simply don't understand the principles and strategies that create significant wealth. Their advice comes from a place of love, but it's based on experiences and mindsets that lead to average financial results. The ability to think independently about money despite social pressure to conform to normal spending and investing patterns might be the most important skill wealthy people develop. It allows them to make contrarian decisions that seem crazy to others, but prove brilliant in retrospect. These psychological and social aspects of wealth building are often more challenging than the technical aspects of investing or business building. Learning how to analyze a stock or evaluate a real estate deal is straightforward compared to developing the mental fortitude to stick with your wealth-building plan when everyone around you thinks you're making mistakes. But here's what makes all of this achievable for anyone willing to commit to the process. These aren't genetic traits or special talents that only certain people possess. These are learnable skills and mindsets that anyone can develop with enough practice and patience. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or talented enough to build significant wealth. The question is whether you're willing to think differently about money than most people, and consistently apply principles that might feel uncomfortable at first but become second nature over time. What I've discovered through years of studying wealth creation is that the gap between wealthy people and everyone else isn't nearly as large as it appears from the outside. It's not that wealthy people are making dramatically different financial moves every day. It's that they're making slightly better decisions consistently over long periods of time, and those small differences compound into enormous advantages. The 5 rules I've shared with you today aren't complex or difficult to understand. But implementing them consistently, especially when they conflict with conventional wisdom or social expectations, requires a level of discipline and independent thinking that most people never develop. The truth is, you already have everything you need to start implementing these 5 rules today. You don't need $1 million in the bank or some secret insider knowledge that only wealthy people possess. You just need to be willing to think differently about money than the majority of people around you. Start small, but start now. Pick one of these principles and begin applying it this week. Maybe that means moving some idle cash into an investment that puts your money to work. Maybe it means reaching out to someone in your network to offer value before asking for anything. Maybe it means questioning whether that car payment or mortgage strategy is actually serving your long-term wealth-building goals. Remember, the people posting about their 3rd vacation this year didn't get there overnight. They got there by consistently following principles like these for years, while everyone else was following conventional wisdom that leads to conventional results. The compound effect of making slightly better financial decisions over time is what creates those seemingly impossible outcomes. If this video has challenged how you think about money, that's exactly what it was supposed to do. The uncomfortable truth is that building real wealth requires doing things differently than most people. But the beautiful truth is that these principles work for anyone willing to apply them consistently. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Make them count.